My name is Katherine Evans. I'm 47 years old. At 6:45 on a Thursday evening in March, I sat at my own dining room table with a folded linen napkin in my lap, while my husband stood at the head of the room and told our family I had been too emotional to understand real pressure. The roast chicken was still cooling on the platter. Rosemary and garlic hung in the air. My sister-in-law had one hand around her wine glass. My mother-in-law was pretending to straighten the silverware, even though every fork was already lined up perfectly. Our daughter, Lily, stared down at her plate. Our son, Noah, looked at the floor. My husband, Martin Evans, smiled like he had said something charming. He had just announced that he had accepted a senior operations role at Harrow Vale Consulting, a firm in Nashville, that everybody at the table treated as if it were carved from marble. He lifted his glass and said, "Finally, a company that recognizes leadership." Everyone clapped. Then his brother asked, "What will Katherine do now? Keep consulting part-time?" Martin laughed softly. "She'll do what she always does," he said, "offer opinions from the sidelines." No one laughed right away. That was what made it worse. He looked at me, still smiling. To be fair, Katie never really had the temperament for executive work. Too emotional, too attached to people. She was always better at mentoring than leading. A fork touched china. My daughter's face went still. My mother-in-law pressed her lips together, but she did not correct him. I did not cry. I did not defend myself. I did not list my degrees, my clients, my contracts, my published work, or the six-figure department I had rebuilt before Martin ever learned how to read a quarterly forecast. I simply reached for my water glass and watched the condensation slide down the side. What they didn't know was that 2 days earlier, Harrow Vale had sent me a confidential consulting agreement to advise their new departmental restructuring, and the woman leading that restructuring was a former intern of mine named Marissa Lane. They also did not know that Marissa had already asked me for one thing. "Please don't warn him," she had said. So I didn't. This is that story. Before I take you back to where all of it began, tell me where you are watching or listening from, and what time it is there. If you have ever been dismissed by someone who borrowed your strength and then called it weakness, I want to hear from you in the comments. And if stories about women who were underestimated, betrayed, and quietly took their power back mean something to you, like this video and subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. Because sometimes the woman they call too emotional is the woman who trained the person holding the folder. But before I tell you what happened when Martin walked into orientation, I need to take you back to the beginning. I met Martin Evans when I was 28, standing under a flickering fluorescent light in the conference room of a mid-sized logistics company in Brentwood, Tennessee. I was wearing a charcoal suit I had bought on clearance and hemmed myself. He was wearing a blue tie and the relaxed confidence of a man who had never been asked to take meeting notes unless he wanted credit for leadership. Back then, I was an organizational development analyst. It was a dry title for work I loved deeply. I studied broken teams. I watched how people spoke in meetings, who got interrupted, whose emails were ignored, until a man repeated the same point with different punctuation. I built training programs, repaired reporting systems, documented workflow failures, and helped managers stop confusing fear with respect. Martin was in operations. He was handsome in a clean, old-fashioned way. Tall, dark hair, easy smile. The kind of man people described as solid after knowing him for 20 minutes. He held doors. He remembered coffee orders. He sent thank you emails with just enough sincerity to look thoughtful and just enough brevity to look important. At first, he admired me. That is the part people don't always understand. Men who diminish you rarely begin by hating your light. Often, they are drawn to it. They stand close enough to feel its warmth, then slowly become offended that it did not originate with them. When we were dating, Martin would introduce me as the smartest person in the room. He would sit across from me at a little Italian restaurant on Belmont Boulevard and ask me about my work. He listened while I explained why a failing department usually had a leadership problem before it had a personnel problem. He called my brain beautiful. He said he loved that I could read people without humiliating them. I believed him. We married when I was 31. Our wedding was small, held in my aunt's backyard in late September. under strings of warm lights and maple leaves turning gold at the edges. My father had died 3 years earlier, so my mother walked me down the aisle. Martin cried when he saw me. I remember that clearly. He wiped his eyes with his thumb, embarrassed and tender. For a long time I thought that memory meant something permanent. Our first house was a brick ranch on Larkspur Drive, with a sloping front yard and a kitchen that smelled faintly of old lemon cleaner no matter how many times I scrubbed the cabinets. We bought furniture slowly. We argued about paint colors and laughed about the dishwasher that sounded like a truck engine. We had Lily when I was 33 and Noah when I was 36. I took 12 weeks of leave each time, answered work emails too soon, and told myself I was choosing balance, though balance often meant I was the one bending. My career kept growing, but not in the showy way Martin's did. He climbed by being visible. I advanced by becoming necessary. By 38, I was director of learning systems at a healthcare technology firm called Mercer Quinn. I oversaw a team of 23 people and a budget of $4.8 million. My department trained managers across 5 states. We reduced employee turnover by 18% in 1 year. I spoke at conferences in Atlanta, Chicago, and Dallas. I published an article on emotionally intelligent leadership that was assigned in a graduate business course at Vanderbilt. At home, Martin called it soft stuff. Not at first. First, he called it people work, then culture work, then your empathy projects. Then, when his own career stalled, soft stuff. Our family, from the outside, looked successful and calm. Martin in press shirts, me in tailored blazers, 2 children with good grades, a tidy house, a rescue dog named Maple, who slept by the fireplace, holiday cards where we stood shoulder to shoulder under bare winter trees and looked like partnership. Inside, the temperature was different. Martin was not a man who shouted often. That would have made things clearer. He preferred the careful sentence, the amused correction, the private nickname, the public joke that left a bruise but sounded harmless to people who wanted dinner to stay pleasant. My role became invisible support. I edited his presentations at midnight after packing school lunches. I coached him through difficult employee conversations. I rewrote his promotion packet when he said he, quote, wasn't good at selling himself. I suggested language for his annual review. I explained how to handle a conflict with a younger manager who thought he was dismissive. He used my phrases in meetings and came home praised for his emotional intelligence. When I received praise, he found a way to make it smaller. The first example happened at his company picnic when Lily was 7 and Noah was 4. Martin's boss, Elaine, had read my article and said, "Katherine, I didn't realize you were doing such influential work." Before I could answer, Martin put his arm around my shoulder and said, "She has always been good with feelings." Elaine blinked. I smiled politely. Martin squeezed my shoulder once, just enough to warn me not to spoil the joke. Later, in the car, I said, "That was belittling." He sighed. "Katie, she complimented you." I agreed. "Why do you have to dissect everything?" The children were in the back seat. I said nothing else. The second example came when I was invited to speak at a leadership summit in Dallas. My session was at 9 in the morning on a Friday. I had spent 3 months preparing. The night before my flight, Noah developed a fever. Martin stood in our bedroom doorway while I packed and said, "I have a budget meeting tomorrow." "So do I said. "It's not the same." I remember folding a navy blouse and laying it in my suitcase. "What does that mean?" He rubbed his forehead. "You talk about workplace feelings. I'm responsible for actual operations." I canceled the flight. My manager understood but was disappointed. The summit replaced me with a man named Greg, who used one of my frameworks and mispronounced my name while crediting the team. Martin's budget meeting lasted 40 minutes. Noah's fever broke before lunch. The third example was the beginning of the end, though I did not know it yet. At 42, I was offered a vice president role at Mercer Quinn. It would have meant more travel, more money, more authority, and a seat at the executive table. I wanted it. I had earned it. My boss, Denise Alvarez, told me, "Katherine, this is not a stretch role. This is recognition." I came home with the offer letter in my bag and waited until after dinner to tell Martin. He did not congratulate me. He stared at the paper, then said, "What happens to the kids?" "They have a father," I said. He smiled like I had said something naive. "You know what I mean." Lily was 12 then. Noah was 9. They were old enough to understand tone even when they could not name it. Martin folded the offer letter and slid it back across the kitchen island. I think you need to ask yourself whether ambition is becoming a coping mechanism. I looked at him. For what? For dissatisfaction, he said. Some women chase titles because they don't want to sit with what their family needs. That sentence did what a scream would not have done. It entered quietly and stayed for years. I turned down the role. I told Denise it was a timing issue. She studied my face and said, "Timing or pressure?" I smiled with my professional mouth. Timing. She did not believe me. Good managers rarely believe the first answer when a woman says no to her own future. The symbolic object in this story is a silver fountain pen. It belonged to my father, who had been a public school principal in Murfreesboro for 29 years. He used it to sign recommendation letters, disciplinary notices, retirement cards, and once, a permission slip for my 5th grade field trip because I had left it on the kitchen counter and cried in the hallway. When I graduated from college, he gave it to me in a small blue box and said, "Use this only when your name matters." After he died, I kept it in my desk drawer. I signed my first director contract with it. I signed mortgage papers with it. I signed Lily's kindergarten forms with it. When Martin began to shrink my work, I stopped using the pen for professional documents. That sounds small, but shame often enters through small doors. I started signing contracts electronically, clicking boxes, typing my name into forms like it mattered less if ink did not touch paper. The pen stayed in the drawer. So did parts of me. By the time I turned 47, Martin and I had been married 16 years. Lily was 14, thoughtful and observant, with my eyes and her father's caution. Noah was 11, gentle, funny, and beginning to understand that jokes at the dinner table were not always jokes. Martin's career had plateaued. He had moved from company to company every few years, always with an explanation. Poor leadership, bad culture, no vision. Younger executives playing politics. He never said, "I did not adapt." He never said, "I do not listen well." He never said, "I resent being managed by women." I had left Mercer Quinn 2 years earlier and built a consulting practice from a small office over a florist on West Main Street. Evans Advisory Learning. I did not use Martin's first name on anything, just Evans, because it was legally mine too. I worked with hospitals, nonprofits, and mid-sized companies on leadership systems. I made less than I would have as a vice president, but more than Martin admitted to his family. I controlled my schedule. I chose my clients. I mentored young professionals, mostly women, because someone had once done that for me. One of those women was Marissa Lane. She came to Mercer Quinn when she was 22, an intern from Tennessee State University with tight curls, sharp questions, and a habit of carrying 3 notebooks because one might not be enough. On her first day, a senior manager called her Melissa twice. She corrected him both times with a smile that never moved above her mouth. I liked her immediately. Marissa did not need confidence. She needed evidence that her confidence had a place to stand. I trained her for 6 months. I taught her how to build meeting agendas that made evasive people commit to timelines. I showed her how to read a budget without being intimidated by the person presenting it. I told her never to apologize before asking a precise question. I let her sit in on executive debriefs, and after each one we spent 20 minutes discussing what had really happened beneath the polite words. One evening, after a long session about leadership accountability, she said, "How do you stay so calm when they dismiss you?" I was 40 then. She was 22. I should have given her a cleaner answer. Instead, I said, "Because I document faster than they can rewrite." She wrote that down. When her internship ended, I signed her recommendation letter with my father's silver fountain pen. I remember the ink gliding across the paper. Marissa stood in my office doorway and said, "One day, I'm going to be in a room where people have to listen." I said, "Then make sure you know what you want to say before you get there." She did. Over the years, Marissa and I stayed loosely connected. She sent updates. First analyst job, first promotion, first direct report, first time she pushed back against a director and won. I replied when I could. I sent notes before interviews. I celebrated her wins privately because Martin had begun rolling his eyes when I mentioned former mentees. "Your little leadership daughters?" He called them once. I said, "Don't call them that." He shrugged. "I mean it affectionately." No, he didn't. The breaking point came during that Thursday dinner in March. Martin had been restless for weeks. He had taken calls in the garage. He had ordered new dress shoes. He had practiced answers in the bathroom mirror with the water running. When I asked about it, he said, "Just some conversations." On the first Monday in March, I saw an email notification flash across his phone while he was in the shower. Harrow Vale offer package. I did not open it. I did not need to. Marriage gives you proximity to information, not ownership of it. I placed the phone face down and continued clearing breakfast dishes. That evening, he told me. "I got it," he said. I was stirring risotto at the stove. The smell of butter and Parmesan filled the kitchen. "What did you get?" "The senior operations role, Harrow Vale." I turned. "Martin, that's significant." He smiled, waiting. "Congratulations," I said. His face tightened slightly. I had not performed enough awe. "It's a major role," he said. "I know. Departmental transformation, executive visibility, real authority." I knew Harrow Vale. Everyone in my field did. They were a consulting firm that specialized in operational restructuring for healthcare, logistics, and manufacturing clients. Their learning and leadership division had grown quickly over the past 5 years. I also knew, though Martin did not, that they had recently hired a new department head to rebuild their internal leadership pipeline. I did not know who yet. Martin leaned against the counter. "They need someone who can handle pressure," he said. "That sounds like a good fit," I replied. He looked disappointed again. Men who are used to being soothed often mistake calm for insufficient devotion. 2 nights later, he insisted on a family dinner to celebrate. His mother, Patricia, came in a cream cardigan and pearls. His brother, Grant, arrived with his wife, Elise. My mother came too, though she had never liked Martin much and liked him less. After the vice president offer, I turned down. Lily and Noah set the table. I roasted chicken, made green beans with almonds, and used the good plates because Martin asked me to. At 6:45, he stood to make his announcement. He enjoyed that room. The faces turned up toward him. The raised glasses. The performance of being admired. "To new beginnings," he said. Grant clapped him on the back. Patricia said, "We always knew you were meant for more." My mother looked down at her wine. Then Grant said, "Katherine, will you consult with him? Give him your people skills magic?" He meant it kindly. I think he did. Martin laughed. "She'll do what she always does, offer opinions from the sidelines." That was the first cut. Then he gave the speech. Too emotional, too attached to people, better at mentoring than leading. The room did not collapse. It held. That is often how public humiliation works in families. The chandelier stays lit. The potatoes stay warm. People keep their hands in their laps. Everyone silently decides whether truth is worth the inconvenience. I looked at Martin as he smiled at me. In that moment, I remembered every document I had edited for him. Every late-night coaching session. Every time he repeated my language to a room that applauded him. Every offer I turned down because he called ambition selfish. Every time my children watched me absorb a sentence meant to make me smaller. I did not answer. I watched his thumb tap the rim of his glass. I counted 5 seconds. Then I understood something I should have understood years earlier. Martin did not misunderstand my work. He understood it well enough to steal from it. That was the moment I stopped waiting for my husband to value my mind and became the woman who protected the record of it. The next morning, at 8:10, I opened my laptop in my office above the florist. The room smelled like eucalyptus from the shop downstairs and coffee from the mug beside my keyboard. Rain tapped lightly against the window overlooking West Main Street. I had 3 client calls scheduled, 2 proposal drafts due, and a quiet ache behind my ribs that felt less like sadness than fatigue. At 9:23, an email arrived. Subject line: Confidential Advisory Inquiry, Harrow Vale. The sender was Marissa Lane. I stared at her name for several seconds. Then I opened it. "Dear Katherine, I hope you're well. I'm reaching out in strict confidence. I've recently accepted the role of Senior Vice President, Leadership Systems and Departmental Integration at Harrow Vale. We are onboarding several senior operations hires next week, and I'm building an advisory panel for evaluation, curriculum review, and leadership integration. Your expertise shaped much of how I think about this work. Would you be open to a discreet consulting engagement? I read it once, then again. Senior Vice President. At Harrow Vale. I leaned back in my chair and looked toward the window. Downstairs, someone carried a bucket of flowers across the sidewalk. The rain made the pavement shine. I did not laugh. I did not clap my hand over my mouth. I did not whisper, "Oh, Martin." I simply opened my desk drawer and took out my father's silver fountain pen. It felt heavier than I remembered. I replied to Marissa at 9:31. I would be glad to discuss the engagement. Congratulations. I am proud of you. She responded within 6 minutes. That means more than you know. Are you free at noon? At noon, we spoke by video. Marissa appeared in a glass-walled office with a blurred skyline behind her. She was 30 now, composed, elegant, and unmistakably in charge. Her curls were pulled back. She wore a deep green blazer. On the wall behind her was a whiteboard, covered in arrows, names, and timelines. "Katherine," she said, smiling, "it's good to see you. You too, Senior Vice President." She laughed softly. "I know, some days I hear it and look behind me. You earned it." Her smile faded into something more serious. "I need your help." She explained that Harrow Vale had grown quickly and unevenly. Their client-facing operations teams were strong, technically, but weak in leadership accountability. Several senior hires were coming in from outside firms. Marissa wanted a structured orientation and evaluation process that measured not just operational knowledge, but communication, ethical judgment, team development, and capacity to work under female leadership. That last phrase landed softly. I said, "Female leadership specifically?" She looked at me for a moment. Yes. Why? Because the last 2 restructuring failures involved senior men who performed respect upward and contempt downward. I held my pen still above my notebook. Marissa continued. "I don't want charisma. I want evidence." Evidence. I almost smiled. She shared the list of incoming hires. There were 7 names. The 4th name was Martin Evans. I kept my face still. Marissa watched me through the screen. "You recognize one," she said, "my husband." I thought so. The room seemed to narrow around the laptop. "How long have you known?" I asked. "Since yesterday," Marissa said. His onboarding file came through with emergency contact information. Spouse, Katherine Evans. Consulting background, Evans Advisory Learning. I wondered. Then I checked the address and I knew. I looked down at the notebook. My father's pen rested between my fingers. "Does Martin know you know me?" "No." "Does he know I'm being considered for this advisory work?" "No." I nodded. Marissa's voice softened. "Katherine, I need to ask something directly. Is this a conflict that makes the engagement impossible?" That was the ethical question. I appreciated that she asked it before the emotional one. "It depends on the scope," I said. "I cannot evaluate my husband's employment status. I cannot influence hiring decisions already made. I cannot privately disclose marital information or participate in any process that targets him." Agreed. "But I can design leadership evaluation tools. I can advise on onboarding structure. I can review curriculum. I can observe group dynamics if everyone is informed and external consultant is present." Marissa nodded. "That's what I want." "Then we need clear boundaries in writing." She smiled faintly. "You taught me that." I looked at her, and for one brief second, I saw the 22-year-old intern in my doorway with 3 notebooks. Then Marissa said, "There is one more thing. His application materials include language from your published article." I became very still. "What language?" She looked down. "In his leadership statement, he writes, 'Sustainable performance emerges when accountability is designed as a relationship, not a threat.' That line is yours." It was. From my article. Paragraph 6. "There are other phrases," she said. "Not enough for a legal issue on its own, perhaps, but enough that I noticed. Enough that our chief people officer noticed after I flagged it." I felt heat move up my neck. For years, Martin had reduced my work to feelings, then used my sentences to make himself look wise. Marissa said, "I'm sorry." I did not answer immediately. I watched rain gather at the edge of the window and fall in a clean line. Then I said, Send me the engagement agreement. Include the conflict boundaries. Include that I am advising on departmental systems, not individual hiring outcomes. I already drafted it, she said. I was hoping you'd say that. Before we ended the call, Marissa leaned slightly closer to the camera. Katherine? Yes. Please don't warn him. I looked at the silver pen in my hand. I won't. That afternoon, I began building my own file, not because I wanted to destroy Martin, because I had spent too many years allowing him to narrate my work as if it were a hobby he tolerated. The first folder was professional record. I downloaded my published articles, conference programs, client testimonials, project summaries, department metrics from Mercer Quinn that I was allowed to retain, old performance reviews, and the recommendation letter I had written for Marissa years earlier. I printed the article containing the line Martin had used. I highlighted the sentence in pale yellow. The second folder was marital career impact. That one hurt more. I found the email from Denise Alvarez offering me the vice president role. The compensation package had been $218,000 plus bonus. I printed my reply declining for family timing reasons. I found the Dallas Summit cancellation email. I found old calendar entries where I had blocked time to edit Martin's presentations. I found documents he had sent me with subject lines like, "Can you make this sound more human? And need your magic before tomorrow." I found one from 4 years earlier where he wrote, "You're better at making leaders sound like they care." I printed that one twice. The third folder was Harrow Vale. Marissa's email. The consulting agreement, the conflict clause, the advisory scope, the orientation agenda, the leadership rubric, the confidentiality terms. I signed the agreement with my father's silver fountain pen at 4:35 that afternoon. The ink looked dark and certain. At home that evening, Martin was in a bright mood. He had bought a new leather portfolio and placed it on the kitchen island like a trophy. Lily was doing homework at the table. Noah was feeding Maple under the mistaken belief that no one could see him slipping chicken into the dog bowl. Martin said, "Orientation starts Monday." "That's soon," I said. "They move fast at that level." I stirred pasta sauce. He opened the portfolio and removed a stack of papers. They sent leadership prep materials. Honestly, basic stuff. Culture, accountability, emotional intelligence. He said emotional intelligence the way someone says scented candle. I kept stirring. Then he added, "You'd probably like it." Lily looked up. I said, "Probably." Martin glanced at me. "Don't take that tone." "What tone?" "That quiet tone you use when you think you know something." I placed the spoon on the rest. "Do I do that?" He smiled. "Constantly." I almost told him. Not about Marissa, not about the agreement. Just enough to give him a chance to stop performing contempt in front of our children. Then I remembered the dining room. Too emotional. Better at mentoring than leading. I remembered Marissa's voice. "Please don't warn him." I picked up the spoon again. By Monday morning, I had reviewed the entire orientation curriculum. Marissa had built it beautifully. The first day included company values, client ethics, operational standards, and a leadership systems session at 11:30. I was scheduled to appear at 2 in the afternoon for a closed advisory workshop with senior hires and department leads. My role: external consultant, leadership systems specialist. Martin left the house at 7:20 in a navy suit, white shirt, and the blue tie I had bought him for our anniversary 3 years earlier. He kissed the air near my cheek, not quite touching me. "Big day," he said. "Yes," I said. "It is." He paused at the door. "Try not to overthink dinner tonight. I'll probably be tired." "I'll keep it simple." He smiled. "See? Supportive already." The door closed behind him. I stood in the entryway for a long moment. The house was quiet, except for Maple's tags jingling as she walked toward me. At 8:15, after Lily and Noah left for school, I went upstairs to my office closet and took out a black sheath dress and a gray blazer. I pulled my hair into a low knot. I put on pearl earrings my mother had given me when I made director. I slid my father's fountain pen into my bag. At 11:50, Marissa texted, "He's here. Confident. Quoted you in the first breakout." I read it once, then I placed the phone face down. I arrived at Harrow and Vale at 1:40. Their Nashville office occupied 4 floors of a glass building downtown, all polished concrete, live plants, and quiet, expensive furniture. The lobby smelled like coffee and new carpet. A receptionist gave me a visitor badge, my name printed clearly beneath the company logo. Katherine Evans, External Advisory Consultant. I clipped it to my blazer. Marissa met me at the elevator. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she hugged me, quickly and professionally, but with feeling. "You look exactly like the woman who taught me to ask for the data," she said, "and you look exactly like the woman people have to answer." She smiled. We walked down a hallway lined with glass conference rooms. Inside one room, I saw senior hires seated around a long table with notebooks and water bottles. Martin sat near the middle, leaning back slightly, one arm draped over the chair beside him. He was speaking to a man on his left. I could not hear the words, but I recognized the posture. Comfortable. Certain. Already performing seniority. He did not see me. Marissa led me into a smaller room first, where I met the Chief People Officer, Daniel Reeves, and the General Counsel, Priya Nair. Daniel was polite, watchful, and direct. Priya had the calm face of someone who heard risk before other people heard language. Marissa reviewed the boundaries. "Katherine will not participate in any employment decision regarding Martin Evans," she said. "Her advisory work applies to the leadership framework, group observations, and curriculum design. Because Mr. Evans is her spouse, all direct evaluation of him will be handled by Daniel, Priya, and me." Priya nodded. "And Mr. Evans will be informed of the relationship when Katherine is introduced as an external advisor." I appreciated that. No tricks, no hidden ambush. Just truth, arriving in the room at the appropriate time. At 2 o'clock we entered the main conference room. There were 18 people present. 7 senior hires, 3 department leads, 4 HR partners, 2 legal observers, Daniel, Marissa, and me. The room smelled faintly of dry erase markers and coffee. Afternoon light spread across the polished table. A large screen displayed the title, Leadership Integration Workshop, Accountability Under Pressure. Martin was looking at his notebook when we walked in. Marissa took her place at the head of the table. "Good afternoon," she said. "For this session, we're going to examine how leadership behavior holds under ambiguity, correction, and relational pressure. I'll be joined by Daniel Reeves, our Chief People Officer, Priya Nair from Legal, and Katherine Evans, an external advisor, specializing in leadership systems and organizational accountability." Martin's pen stopped moving. Then he looked up. His face did not collapse. Martin was too practiced for that. But something small and essential slipped. His smile stayed in place, and his eyes went blank for half a second. Marissa continued. "Katherine's work has influenced several frameworks we use in this department. Some of you may have encountered her published writing on accountability-centered leadership." A woman at the far end of the table nodded. "I read your article in grad school." "Thank you," I said. My voice was steady. Martin stared at me. I sat 3 chairs down from Marissa, opened my folder, and placed my father's silver pen beside it. No one else knew what that pen meant. I did. For the first 20 minutes, the workshop was ordinary. Marissa divided them into groups. They analyzed a case study about a department missing client deadlines because junior staff were afraid to report problems early. Martin contributed smoothly. He used phrases like clear escalation pathways and emotional discipline. He did not look at me when he spoke. Then Marissa shifted the room. "We're going to discuss language," she said, "specifically how leaders borrow values language without practicing the underlying behavior." The screen changed. A slide appeared with 2 columns. Column 1, Leadership Claim. Column 2, Observable Evidence. Marissa said, "A leader may claim to value transparency. What evidence would show that?" A man named Peter said, "They share relevant information early." A woman named Sunita added, "They don't punish bad news." "Good," Marissa said. "A leader may claim to value emotional intelligence. What evidence would show that?" Martin leaned forward. "They keep emotion out of critical decisions." Marissa turned toward him. "Interesting. Katherine, would you respond to that distinction? There it was. Not a trap. A question. I folded my hands lightly on the table. Emotional intelligence does not mean removing emotion from decisions, I said. It means understanding how emotion affects judgment, communication, trust, and risk. Leaders who claim they are emotionless are often simply unaware of which emotions are driving them. The room went quiet in the way professional rooms go quiet when something accurate has been said without aggression. Martin's jaw tightened. I continued. Anger can call itself urgency. Fear can call itself standards. Insecurity can call itself accountability. Contempt often calls itself logic. Marissa wrote one word on the whiteboard. Contempt. Martin looked down. The workshop continued. We discussed documented behavior, feedback loops, ethical use of influence, and the difference between authority and credibility. I did not address Martin directly. I did not mention our marriage. I did not expose private conversations. I did not need to. His own performance began to strain. During a scenario about a manager dismissing a subordinate's expertise, Martin said, "There's also a point where employees need thicker skin." Daniel asked, "How do you distinguish thin skin from a legitimate concern?" Martin replied, "Experience." Priya asked, "Whose experience?" The room waited. Martin smiled. "The leaders." Marissa wrote another word, assumption. I watched Martin see the shape of the room changing. He was used to being rewarded for sounding decisive. Here, decisiveness without evidence was being placed under glass. At 2:58, Marissa introduced the final exercise. "Each of you submitted a leadership statement as part of your onboarding packet," she said. We selected several anonymized lines for discussion. The goal is not embarrassment. The goal is alignment between language and practice. The screen changed again. I knew the line before I saw it. Sustainable performance emerges when accountability is designed as a relationship, not a threat. Martin became very still. Marissa looked at the group. "Strong sentence. What does it require in practice?" Sunita said, "Trust." Peter said, "Consistency." Another hire said, "A leader who doesn't use power to silence feedback." Marissa nodded. "Katherine, this line comes from your published work. Would you explain its intended meaning?" Martin's eyes moved to me. "There are moments when revenge could become cruelty if you are not careful. You feel the door open. You feel the sentence you could say. You feel every private insult asking for a public return." I did not take that road. I looked at the screen. When I wrote that sentence, I said, I was studying departments where employees hid problems until they became expensive. Threat-based accountability made people perform compliance while withholding truth. Relationship-based accountability did not mean softness. It meant clarity, documented expectations, psychological safety, and consequences people could understand before fear distorted their behavior. I paused. Then I added, the sentence is often misunderstood by people who want the language of trust without the discipline of earning it. No one moved. Martin's pen rolled slightly under his fingers. Marissa said, "Thank you." She did not say Martin used your line. She did not need to. The room had seen the slide. The slide had no name on it, but Martin knew. Marissa knew. Daniel knew. Priya knew. And perhaps most importantly, Martin knew that I knew. At the end of the workshop, everyone stood. Chairs scraped. Notebooks closed. People thanked Marissa, Daniel, me. A woman named Rachel asked for my article title. I wrote it down for her with my father's pen. Martin stayed seated until most people had left. Then he stood and approached me near the glass wall. His smile was gone. "What are you doing here?" he asked quietly. I placed my notes into my folder. "Working." "You should have told me." "Why?" "Because I walked into a room and saw my wife sitting there like some kind of ambush." I looked at him. "You walked into orientation and saw an external consultant." His eyes hardened. "Don't play games with me, Katherine." Marissa was across the room speaking with Daniel, but I saw her glance over. I kept my voice low. "I am not playing games. I signed a conflict disclosure. I am not evaluating your employment. I am advising the department." "You humiliated me." I looked at him for a long second. "No," I said. I recognized your language. His face changed color. That line was common, he said. It was mine. He looked toward the hallway, then back at me. You're being emotional. There it was, still. Even there, in that room, with my name on the article and my pen in my hand. He reached for the word he had always used as a leash. I did not answer immediately. I watched the second hand on the wall clock move once, twice, 3 times. Then I said, Martin, you should be careful. In this building, emotional intelligence is part of the performance review. I closed my folder. He said, we'll discuss this at home. No, I said, we won't. For the first time, he looked uncertain. I walked away before he could decide what kind of husband he wanted to perform. That night, I did not cook dinner. I picked up Thai food from a restaurant near the office and brought home 3 containers for myself and the children. Martin came in at 7:20 with his tie loosened and his face arranged into injured dignity. Lily and Noah were at the kitchen table. Maple slept under Noah's chair. Martin looked at the takeout boxes. Nice, he said, so we're doing punishment meals now. Lily's fork paused halfway to her mouth. I said, the children are eating dinner. Do not recruit them into your mood. He stared at me. Excuse me? You heard me. Noah looked from him to me. Martin laughed, but it had no warmth. Look at you, one afternoon in a conference room, and suddenly you're the CEO of the house. I wiped my hands on a towel. Martin, I said, if you want to discuss today, we can do that privately after the kids finish eating. He looked at Lily. You see what your mother is doing? She embarrassed me at work, and now she's pretending to be calm. Lily put down her fork. She seemed calm to me, she said. The room went silent. Martin looked at his daughter as if she had spoken a language he did not know she understood. I saw Lily's hand tremble slightly near her plate. She was brave, but she was still 14. I said, Lily, finish your dinner. Martin stepped back. Oh, I see, we're all on Katherine's team now. Noah whispered, Dad, stop. That was the smallest voice in the room, and it landed hardest. Martin looked at our son. Something like shame crossed his face, but it did not stay. Shame only helps people who are willing to learn from it. He left the kitchen. I heard the study door close. The children and I ate in quiet. Not comfortable quiet. Honest quiet. After dinner, Lily helped me clear the plates. At the sink, she said, Mom? Yes. Were you really his consultant today? I was a consultant for the department. Did you know his boss? I turned off the water. Yes. I trained her when she was younger. Lily looked at me carefully. He always makes it sound like your work is just talking. I dried my hands. Some people call things small when they are afraid of how large they are. She nodded as if she would remember that. Later, after the children went upstairs, Martin came into the kitchen. He had poured himself bourbon. He never drank bourbon unless he wanted to look like a man in a movie making a difficult decision. We need to set boundaries, he said. I almost smiled at his choice of word. Yes, I said, we do. You will withdraw from that consulting engagement. No. His glass stopped halfway to his mouth. No. No. It's inappropriate. The conflict was disclosed. I am not supervising you, reviewing you, or making employment recommendations about you. You are my wife. I am also a professional. He looked offended by the order of those words. This is exactly what I mean, he said. You get emotional and then hide behind language. I opened the drawer beside the stove and removed the second folder, the marital career impact folder. I placed it on the kitchen island between us. The sound was soft. Martin looked at it. What is that? A record. Of what? Years of language. He laughed once. You made a folder on me? I made a folder for myself. He did not touch it. I opened it to the email he had sent me 4 years earlier. Can you make this sound more human? You're better at making leaders sound like they care. I turned it toward him. Then another. Need your magic before tomorrow. Then another. How would you handle this employee? She's too sensitive, but HR is watching. His face tightened. I placed the vice president offer letter on top. This is the role I turned down, after you told me ambition might be a coping mechanism." He looked away. I said, "I am not asking you to apologize tonight. I am telling you the story you tell about me is over." He lifted the glass and drank. Then he said the sentence that broke the marriage cleanly, though quietly. "Maybe if you had been less obsessed with proving yourself, I would have respected it more." There it was, not confusion, not clumsiness, contempt. I looked at the man I had married under September lights, the man who had once cried when I walked toward him. The man who had used my mind as scaffolding and then complained that I stood too tall. I closed the folder. "I'll be sleeping in the guest room," I said. He scoffed. "Don't be dramatic." "I'm not." I picked up the folder and walked upstairs. By the following Friday, Martin's new role had begun to fray, not because I touched it, because the systems he had entered required what he had pretended to possess. Harrow Vale's onboarding process included documented peer feedback, scenario-based leadership assessments, and live facilitation exercises. Martin was excellent when speaking broadly. He struggled when asked to demonstrate listening. He became impatient when junior HR partners challenged his assumptions. He corrected women more than men. He interrupted Marissa twice in a strategic planning session, then apologized to Daniel instead of to her. Daniel noticed. Priya noticed. Marissa noticed. I knew because I attended only the sessions where I was scheduled, and I read only the group-level notes relevant to curriculum improvement. I did not need private updates. Martin came home carrying his own evidence in his posture. On Wednesday evening, he threw his keys into the ceramic bowl by the door, hard enough to chip the rim. "Bad day?" I asked from the dining table, where I was reviewing a client proposal. He loosened his tie. "Your friend is impossible." "Marissa?" "She's performative." I looked up. "How?" "She asks questions she already knows the answers to. That is often how executives test clarity." He glared at me. "Do not coach me." I lowered my eyes to the proposal. "Then I won't." He stood there, waiting for more. I gave him nothing. The next day, he texted me at 3:12. "Call me." I did not. I was with a client. At 3:16. "Katherine. This is urgent." At 4:05, I called. He answered immediately. "Did you tell Marissa about the dinner?" "No." "Don't lie." I didn't. She used the phrase contempt disguised as logic in a meeting. So did I during the workshop. "You knew what you were doing." I knew what I was teaching. He exhaled sharply. "They're putting me on a 90-day leadership integration plan." I closed my office door. What does that mean? It means they're watching me. It sounds like they're documenting expectations. Don't use that voice. What voice? The calm, superior one. I looked at my father's pen lying across the open notebook. "Martin, I am not responsible for how you perform under observation." He was silent. Then he said lower, "You could help me." There it was, the old door, the late-night edits, the borrowed language. The wife behind the curtain, making the man on stage sound-wise. A year earlier, I might have stepped through it. I might have said, "Send me the plan." I might have helped him translate humility into acceptable corporate language. I might have saved him from the consequences of being exactly who he had been in our kitchen. Instead, I said, "You have resources at work. You're really gonna do this?" "Do what?" "Abandon me." I watched a delivery truck stop outside the florist below. A young man carried white lilies through the rain. "No," I said. "I'm going to stop substituting my competence for your accountability." He hung up. I saved the call time in my notes. By April, the house had become divided without anyone announcing a division. Martin slept in the primary bedroom. I slept in the guest room with a stack of books on the nightstand and Maple pressed against my legs. Lily and Noah moved carefully between us. I hated that part. Children should not have to become weather instruments for adult tension. So the first Saturday in April, I took them to breakfast at a diner on Columbia Avenue. We sat in a red vinyl booth. Noah ordered chocolate chip pancakes. Lily ordered eggs and did not eat them. I said, I want to tell you both something clearly." They looked at me. "Your father and I are having adult problems. They are not your fault, they are not yours to fix. You are allowed to love both of us. You are allowed to be upset. You are allowed to ask questions. And if I can answer them honestly without making you carry something too heavy, I will." Noah stirred syrup with his fork. "Are you getting divorced?" he asked. The word sat on the table beside the salt shaker. "I don't know yet," I said. "But I am speaking with someone who helps families make decisions carefully." Lily knew what that meant. "A lawyer?" "Yes." She nodded. Noah looked scared. I reached across the table, palm up. He placed his small hand in mine. "No matter what happens," I said, "you will have a home, you will have dinner, you will have school pickups, you will have birthdays, you will not have to choose who to comfort." Lily looked out the window. "Dad says you're trying to ruin him." "I'm trying to tell the truth about my own life." She looked back at me. "That sounds different." "It is." I met with a family law attorney named Rebecca Stone on the second Tuesday in April. Her office was in an old building with creaking floors and framed courthouse sketches on the walls. She wore navy glasses and asked direct questions without making them feel sharp. I brought folders. Professional record, marital career impact, household finances, parenting schedules, tax returns, mortgage documents, retirement accounts, Martin's recent texts, my consulting agreement with Harrow and Vale, and the conflict disclosure. Rebecca read for a long time. Then she said, "You are not here impulsively." "No." "Are you safe at home?" "Yes." "Has he threatened you financially?" I thought carefully. "Not directly." "Emotionally?" I looked at the folder. "Yes." She nodded, as if that answer had weight but did not require performance. We discussed legal separation, custody, mediation, financial disclosures, the difference between marital property and professional reputation. She told me not to leave the house without a plan. She told me to communicate in writing when possible. She told me to stop editing Martin's documents immediately. "I already have," I said. "Good." Before I left, she tapped the silver fountain pen beside my notebook. "Beautiful pen. My father's." "Then use it," she said. On April 15th, I signed the engagement letter with Rebecca Stone using that pen. The signature looked like a return. The public payoff came 3 weeks later, but not in a courtroom. It happened in a glass conference room on the 32nd floor of Harrow Vale during Martin's leadership integration review. I did not plan for it to be public, in the way family humiliation is public. It was professional public. Witnesses. Documents. A table. People whose job was to hear facts and respond accordingly. My presence had been requested because the review included the leadership framework I had helped design. Priya confirmed the boundaries again in writing. I would speak to the framework, not recommend an employment outcome. Martin had been notified that I would be present as an external advisor. He objected. Harrow and Vale documented the objection and proceeded because the framework review involved all senior operations hires, not just him. The meeting was scheduled for Wednesday, April 24th at 10 in the morning. I arrived at 9:40. The city below looked washed clean after overnight rain. I wore a charcoal dress, black blazer, and the pearl earrings again. My father's pen was in my folder. Marissa was already in the room with Daniel and Priya. A large screen displayed the meeting title, Leadership Integration Review, Senior Operations Cohort. There were 8 chairs, water glasses, printed packets, a speakerphone, no flowers, no family photos, no roast chicken cooling on a platter, just documents and consequences. Martin entered at 9:58. He saw me, then looked away. He wore the blue tie again. His face looked thinner than it had a month earlier. Stress had made him sharper at the edges, but not softer. At 10, Priya closed the door. The click was gentle. Marissa began. "Thank you, everyone." Today's review covers the first 30 days of integration for the Senior Operations Cohort. We will discuss strengths, gaps, documented observations, and next steps. This is not a disciplinary hearing. It is a formal performance alignment meeting. Martin sat back. I'd like my objection to Katherine's presence noted. Priya said, it is noted. As previously explained, Ms. Evans is present only to address the framework she designed and group-level leadership standards. She will not participate in your employment determination. Martin's mouth tightened. Daniel opened a folder. We'll start with the leadership standards. For 20 minutes, the meeting stayed procedural. Daniel discussed the cohort. Marissa discussed departmental goals. I explained the framework: clarity, evidence, accountability, respect under correction, and ethical use of authority. I spoke as I would for any client. Calm. Specific. Boring in the places where boring protects the truth. Then Daniel moved to individual review. Martin's section began with strengths: strategic operations knowledge, strong process vocabulary, confidence in executive settings, ability to identify workflow inefficiencies quickly. Then came growth concerns: documented interruption patterns, resistance to feedback from female leaders, attribution of communication failures to others, sensitivity, use of values-based language without corresponding observable behaviors. Martin shifted in his chair. That last one is subjective, he said. Marissa folded her hands. We anticipated that concern. That's why we brought examples. She clicked the remote. The first slide showed a transcript excerpt from a recorded training simulation, consented to by all participants. Employee: I'm not clear on who owns escalation. Martin: that should be obvious from the structure. Employee: I'm asking because 2 directors gave conflicting instructions. Martin: then use judgment. We can't handhold every ambiguity. Marissa said, the standard being assessed was clarity under pressure. The expected behavior was to define ownership or ask clarifying questions. Instead, the employee's request was reframed as dependence. Martin said, that is one excerpt. Daniel nodded. Correct. Marissa clicked again. A second excerpt, a third, a fourth. Each one small, each one defensible alone. Together they formed a pattern. That is what documentation does. It removes the hiding place between incidents. Martin's face reddened. This is excessive, he said. Priya made a note. Marissa said, we're not questioning your technical knowledge. We're addressing leadership behavior. Martin turned toward Daniel. I find it interesting that every concern seems to align with Katherine's consulting philosophy. There it was. The pivot. Make the woman the problem. Make the framework personal. Make accountability look like emotion wearing a blazer. Daniel looked at him calmly. The concerns were documented by 6 observers across 9 sessions. Martin said, influenced observers. Marissa's face did not change. By whom? He gestured toward me. By my wife. The word wife landed heavily. I did not move. Priya looked up. Mr. Evans, are you alleging Ms. Evans instructed employees to document false observations? Martin hesitated. No, he said. I'm saying there is bias. Priya said, specifics? He looked trapped by the requirement of detail. She has personal resentment. Marissa said, against you? Yes. Daniel asked, and how would that explain observations submitted by staff members who have never met her? Martin opened his mouth, closed it. No one spoke for 7 seconds. Then, Marissa clicked to the next slide. It displayed 2 text blocks. On the left, an excerpt from Martin's submitted leadership statement. On the right, an excerpt from my published article with citation. The shared sentence was highlighted. Sustainable performance emerges when accountability is designed as a relationship, not a threat. The room became very still. Martin's face changed, not pale exactly, emptied. Marissa said, this was found during routine onboarding review. We are not treating it as a formal plagiarism claim at this stage. However, it raises a credibility concern because the concept has been repeatedly used in your self-presentation, while your observed behavior contradicts the cited framework. Martin's voice was lower. I didn't know it was hers. I looked at him then. He did not look back. Priya said, Mr. Evans, the article is publicly available under Katherine Evans's byline. It appeared in your onboarding statement without attribution. He said, it was a common idea. Marissa clicked again. More highlighted phrases appeared. not whole paragraphs, not enough to be dramatic, enough to be undeniable. Accountability as relational architecture. Fear creates reporting delays. Contempt often disguises itself as urgency. My words, my years, my work. There was a soft sound beside me. Daniel closing his pen. Marissa said, "Katherine, for the record, can you confirm whether these excerpts originated in your published work?" This was the moment, not the family dinner, not the first orientation. This. The room had witnesses. Legal. Human resources. A former intern, now leading the department. My husband sitting across from me after years of calling my work emotional while using it to decorate his authority. I placed my father's silver pen on the table. The tiny click it made against the glass sounded louder than it should have. I said, "Yes, those excerpts originated in my published work." Martin stared at the table. Priya asked, "Did you authorize Mr. Evans to use that language in his leadership statement?" "No." My voice did not shake. Daniel asked, "Did you assist him in preparing that statement?" "No." Marissa asked one final question, and her voice was almost gentle. "Did you train or mentor any leader at Harrow Vale in the development of this accountability framework before this engagement?" I looked at her. "Yes," I said. "I trained you." No one spoke. Marissa nodded once, not triumphant, not emotional, just complete. Martin's chair scraped back an inch. "This is unbelievable," he said. Priya looked at him. "Please remain seated." He did. That was when I understood the reversal fully. For years, Martin had stood at the head of rooms and made me smaller with language. Now language had become the room. Daniel turned to Martin. "Here are the next steps. Your leadership integration plan will be extended and revised. You will complete executive coaching with an external provider selected by Harrow Vale. You will submit revised leadership materials with proper attribution where needed. You will not represent frameworks or concepts you did not create as original work. Your team assignment will remain provisional pending the 60-day review." Martin's jaw worked. Marissa added, "And you will report directly to me during this integration period." That was the public consequence. Not termination, not dramatic ruin. Something harder for Martin. Accountability, under the authority of the woman he had unknowingly entered the building beneath. He looked at Marissa with a smile that tried to become respectful and could not quite find the shape. "Understood," he said, but everyone heard the delay. After the meeting, I gathered my papers slowly. Martin remained seated while Daniel and Priya stepped out. Marissa stayed by the screen. When the room was nearly empty, Martin said, "Katherine." I looked at him. His voice was quiet. "You enjoyed that." I considered the accusation. Then I said, "No, I recognized it." He shook his head. "You let them humiliate me." I slid my father's pen into my folder. "You did not feel humiliated when you called my work emotional in our dining room." "That was different." "Yes," I said. "There were fewer documents." Marissa turned slightly toward the window. She gave us privacy without leaving me alone. Martin leaned forward. "You are my wife." I looked at him for a long time. I said, "before you made that smaller than being useful." He said nothing. I left the room. By the time I reached the elevator, my hands had begun to tremble. Not from fear, from release. I pressed the down button and watched the number glow above the doors. 32, 31, 30. Marissa walked up beside me. "You were fair," she said. "I wanted to be cruel for about 3 seconds." "That's human." I didn't want him fired. "I know." The elevator doors opened. Before I stepped inside, she said, "Katherine?" I turned. She smiled softly. "You were never just good at mentoring." The doors closed before I could answer. I cried in my car for 6 minutes. Private tears. Quiet ones. The kind that do not ask anyone to change the story. I cried for the vice president role. For the Dallas summit. For my children hearing their mother diminished at dinner. For the younger version of me who thought being loved meant being endlessly useful. For the father who had given me a pen and trusted I would know when my name mattered. Then I wiped my face, checked the mirror, and drove home. The aftermath unfolded with the same patience as the evidence. Martin lasted 74 more days at Harrow Vale. Not because Marissa targeted him. Not because I interfered. Because he could not adjust to being measured by standards he had once used only as decoration. He completed 3 coaching sessions, missed the 4th, blamed scheduling confusion, interrupted a vice president during a client readiness meeting, and submitted a revised leadership statement that removed my phrases but somehow also removed any evidence of reflection. At the 60-day review, Harrow Vale offered him a choice: transition to a non-leadership operations advisory role with reduced authority, or accept a separation package. He accepted the package. At home, he called it politics. I called Rebecca Stone. We filed for legal separation on the first Monday in July. Martin was served at 9:10 on a humid Tuesday morning. The process server came to the house because he was working remotely. I was at my office. Lily and Noah were at summer camp. He called me at 9:21, then 9:22, then 9:24. I did not answer. I let Rebecca respond. That evening, he sat across from me at the kitchen table with the papers between us. "You're ending our family," he said. "No," I said. "I'm ending the part where I disappear to keep it intact." He rubbed his hands over his face. "I lost my job. You accepted a separation package. Because of you. Because of documented behavior." He laughed bitterly. "There it is. Documentation, your religion." I looked at him calmly. "No, Martin, my protection." He stared at me for a long time. Then, softer, "Did you ever love me?" That question hurt because the answer was simple: yes. His face shifted, maybe expecting more. I gave him the rest. "But I loved you in rooms where you taught yourself not to respect me." He looked down at the papers. For once, he had no sentence ready. Mediation began in August. We sat in separate rooms at Rebecca's office because she advised it would be more productive. Martin wanted the house sold immediately. I wanted the children to remain in it through the school year. Financial disclosures showed what I already knew and what Martin had preferred not to know. My consulting practice was stable, profitable, and growing. His income had been higher in bursts, but inconsistent. I had paid more toward the mortgage for 3 years. When the mediator brought that up, Martin said, "She never told me she was making that much." Rebecca looked at the spreadsheet. "She filed joint tax returns with you." I was not in the room, but Rebecca told me later there was a silence after that. Numbers are difficult to accuse of being emotional. In September, Lily joined me on the back porch after dinner. The air smelled like cut grass. Maple slept near the steps. Lily sat in the other chair and pulled her knees to her chest. "Dad says you embarrassed him at work," she said. "I know." "Did you?" I looked out at the yard where the hydrangeas had browned at the edges. "I told the truth in a room where truth mattered," I said. "That embarrassed him." She nodded slowly. Then she said, "He used to tell me not to be so sensitive." I turned toward her. "When?" "When I got upset about debate club. Or when Noah cried about soccer. He'd say, 'We got it from you.'" The old guilt rose for a moment, not because I had caused it, because I had not seen all of it. "I'm sorry," I said. Lily looked at me. "You don't have to be sorry for having feelings." I almost cried then. Instead, I reached across the space between our chairs. She took my hand. In October, the separation agreement was finalized. I kept the house through Noah's middle school transition. Martin moved into a townhome near his brother. We shared custody, with clear schedules and written communication through a parenting app. Martin hated the app. I loved it. It turned performance into timestamps. He found another job eventually, smaller than Harrow Vale, with less authority and more oversight. I did not celebrate that. I did not send the article to his new employer. I did not tell mutual friends the details. People knew enough. They always do. Marissa stayed at Harrow Vale. Her department thrived. 6 months after Martin's exit, she invited me to speak at their annual leadership retreat. I stood in a hotel ballroom in front of 200 professionals and gave a talk called The Evidence of Respect. I wore a deep blue dress. My father's silver fountain pen rested on the podium beside my notes. Halfway through, I looked out at the audience and saw young women taking notes. One had 3 notebooks. After the talk, she approached me and said, "How do you stay so calm when people underestimate you?" I smiled because life has a way of handing you your old questions through new faces. "I don't always," I said, "but I try to build records stronger than their assumptions." She wrote it down. That evening, I came home to the brick house on Larkspur Drive. Lily was studying at the kitchen table. Noah was building something out of cardboard for school. Maple barked once, and then remembered she was too old to get up quickly. On the counter was a vase of flowers from the florist below my office. The card was from Marissa. "Use your name. Always." I placed the card in my desk drawer, beside my father's pen box. For years, I had believed peace would come when Martin finally admitted what he had done. I imagined one clean apology. One evening at the kitchen table where he would say, "I made you smaller because I felt small." I thought that sentence would release me. It never came. What came instead was better. I stopped needing him to name the harm before I believed it had happened. That is a quiet kind of freedom. Not cinematic. Not loud. It does not arrive with applause. It arrives when you read an old email and no longer argue with yourself about what it meant. It arrives when your daughter says sensitivity is not a defect. It arrives when a former intern becomes the executive in the room and does not have to raise her voice to be obeyed. It arrives when you sign your own agreement with your father's pen and your hand does not shake. People think revenge is watching someone fall. It is not. Sometimes revenge is watching a man enter a room where your work arrived before he did. Sometimes it is a former intern asking the questions he cannot charm his way around. Sometimes it is a slide with your words on one side and his borrowed authority on the other. Sometimes it is the sentence, "Did you authorize him to use that language?" And sometimes it is simply this: the woman he called too emotional keeps her seat, opens her folder, and tells the truth in a voice no one can dismiss. I still have the silver fountain pen. I use it often now. Contracts. Letters. School forms. A birthday card for Lily when she turned 15. A note to Noah after his first school play, telling him courage does not always feel brave while it is happening. The pen no longer lives in the back of the drawer. It sits on my desk, beside my calendar, where I can see it. My name matters. It always did. So tell me, if someone spent years calling your strength weakness while building their career from your words, would you keep correcting them in private? Or would you let the right room hear the truth? Thank you for staying with me through this one. Stories like Katherine's are not really about promotions, offices, or titles. They are about the moment a woman stops waiting for the person who diminished her to become the witness she deserved. If you know what it feels like to be called too emotional by someone who benefited from your patience, subscribe to Ultimate Revenge. There are more quiet women, more closed conference rooms, more folders opened at the perfect time, and more truths waiting for the person who thought she was only standing on the sidelines.